Hello. We have an exciting milestone. This is episode 10 of season 1, which means that it is our season finale for season 1. And so what that means is we're going to take 1 week of a break before launching episode 1 of season 2, which will release on Monday, September 30th. So every Monday we have an episode release. Our seasons are 10 episodes each season, and then we'll take a 1 week break between seasons. So after this episode, we'll see you here again on your feed, wherever you're listening, on Monday, September 30th. And there will be a bonus episode in between seasons on Patreon. So if you are not a part of Patreon yet, now is a great time to join. I'm releasing some exclusive content specifically for patrons. Tiers start at $1 a month. So how can you beat that? And that's anywhere from early release episodes to exclusive content, live streams, Q&As, and also access to join these recordings as a live audience, which is a really exciting thing to be able to do. So check us out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Nexus of Narratives, or search Nexus of Narratives on Patreon. The link is also in the show notes. And so for season 2, I will have a friend as a co-host. So we will actually open up episodes with a couple of minutes of us discussing what a fantastic conversation it is, kind of what to expect. We'll have our content warning in there, general housekeeping, things that most of you are likely used to hearing in traditional podcasts that we haven't quite had consistently here in Nexus of Narratives quite yet. So we'll be adding in that polished consistency in the beginning of each episode with a friend. So it's not just me speaking to a screen as I am right now. We actually have some conversation with people through all of it. And so for this episode, it's an incredible episode. I've listened to it, I think, more times than I've listened to any other episode, which for each of them is at least 3 times before being released. And Lisa and I just had such an incredible conversation about being rooted in your beliefs and your values, and especially when it comes to being a woman and having a voice and speaking up with that voice, and how to have courageous conversations that are about different beliefs and about different topics that are difficult to have conversations with just because of our cultural landscape here in the United States, and sometimes in other cultures too, based on what she has shared. So it's just such an incredible conversation. And as the finale, it is a bit longer than some of our episodes. So I hope that you as a listener find a ton of joy in that. And also, this was the first time we recorded in my living room at home, and I am completely responsible for it. I have some decent microphones, but I made an error. And so the audio quality is not the best. It's not up to par with the standards that I have set for this podcast. And of course, it's still listenable. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sharing it. But it's certainly not an audio quality that you will continue to hear. So I just ask for your grace and compassion in this episode, because the content is absolutely worth it. So you'll hear some popping here and there. The vocal quality is not the best. We've done a lot of work to doctor it up. And for some little joyous Easter eggs, you'll hear my sweet daughter and dog paws from upstairs, pitter-pattering, pounding around. I had my daughter, the babysitter, and both dogs upstairs. So there's some sound in the background from that. So hopefully that brings you a little smile when you hear those stomps of a playful 1-year-old in the background. So without taking up any more of your time, I'm so grateful for your engagement and your listening and all of the incredible feedback that I've gotten in season 1. Like, what an absolute delight. This is just a passion project of mine with low expectations for reach. It's something that I started thinking, oh, I want to, create impact in the world. I want to share messages. I want to share courageous conversations. I want to model what it's like to have courageous conversations and be a part of those. And I am so honored, so deeply honored for the vulnerability that people have shared with me, not only in recording these episodes of the ones that you've heard here in season 1, or even some that you have yet to hear in season 2. And even it just brings such a joy to me when I send a message to everyone who follows me on Instagram, just as a thank you for following and just an expression of gratitude. And the amount of people that I've had respond with this openness to a stranger that it's such an honor. It to me feels like I'm doing something right here. And it's really giving me the momentum to continue this work, to know that my intention was to create connection and create impact and build connection and build compassion and encourage people to have courageous conversations. And that's happening. So what a joy. And I'm so grateful for every single person listening, all who have engaged thus far, future listeners who are listening back to this. I'm so excited to see how this work continues to grow. And so, as always, if you would like to connect with me, please do. I monitor my Instagram. There are ways to connect with me there. My information is in the show notes. You can go onto my website. And go into the Nexus of Narratives website. So that's nexusofnarratives.org, or my business website is thenexusimpact.com. So I look forward to continuing this fantastic journey. Enjoy this episode with Lisa. Please give me grace with the audio on this one. And we'll see you again on September 30th for episode 1 of season 2, or see you a week earlier than that if you are on Patreon. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Gabriella Richardson, and I am a lover of learning. I am a cultivator of community, and I am a seeker of belonging. I am a messy and imperfect human, just trying to do my best to make this world a little bit of a better place. So I look forward to you joining me in that pursuit on the Nexus of Narratives. Well, here we are. Welcome. We're in my home, so this is a fun little change of pace to reorganize a little bit of the living room and have this in a more intimate setting. So thank you for being my guinea pig for joining me at home.
Of course.
Yeah. So I think we met probably like a year, maybe a little more than a year ago. I feel like I was still pregnant.
Beginning of the year? No, you had just had the baby.
All right, just had a baby. So about a year ago then. And through the Colorado Small Business Association, and was connected with you as a person with expertise in like balancing business and community, and with some expertise in nonprofit. And it has been such a delight getting to know you better as this very strong woman who is very knowledgeable and cares so deeply about balancing the success of business and supporting entrepreneurs, but also like elevating people to be their best selves, and especially in supporting women. And it's just so powerful. Every time I get to know you a little bit better. So I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, me too. No, likewise.
Oh, thank you. So before we dig into the invitation to be more vulnerable and share a story, if you were to bump into someone on the road and say, "Hi, I'm Lisa," what would you say? How would you introduce yourself in a quick moment?
Goodness. So I'm Lisa, and I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I work with nonprofits, and I'm especially passionate about working with organizations that serve women and girls. I feel like my purpose in life is just to serve young women.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that.
I don't know if I'd say that to someone on the street, but
I love getting the quick, like, high level, this is who I am in the smallest of nutshells before we like really dig beneath the surface. There is so fun. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining the Nexus of Narratives. And we talked about sharing a story. So wherever you would like to start in sharing a story of yours, I'll just let you take it.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I feel like I was on this path to serve women and girls kind of my whole life. And probably what I want to share is when I moved to Colorado in 2003 and started a publishing company from there. Decided to start an agency called With Good Cause, serving nonprofits, creating marketing plans, fundraising strategy, and community engagement planning. And along the way, it was good work. I was fulfilled. I was happy. But my mother passed away in 2012, and I really felt lost, for one. I was kind of just drowning in this grief. And I grew up learning that when you're suffering, when you're struggling, to connect more deeply with your community. And so I started, so I reached out to a friend who was a program manager at a nonprofit that I had volunteered for in the past for many years, but primarily doing like fundraising work. And I served on their board, and I reached out to him and I said, can I come and help with after school programming? This was a dropout prevention program for low-income kids, and they had after school tutoring, mentoring, field trips, all that kind of stuff. And I thought, I just need somewhere to show up like a couple days a week and be present and have it not be about me. And I kind of thought I would be, helping the younger kids, with reading and simple math and stuff like that. Like I'm not very studious, never was. But what ended up happening, this was a program that had all aged kids. And I really gravitated toward the teenagers and started spending a lot of time there, and really could identify with their struggles, but also with how intense life is when you're 15. And, your lens on the world is small. It's very focused, and it's very focused on you. So everything feels just outsized, right? And I think sometimes adults dismiss adolescents because of that. Like, oh, it's not that big a deal, but to them it is a big deal. And so I just started spending more time there, and those kids really saved me in a lot of ways, from my grief, from re-identifying with my purpose. And so there were several young women there that I just started spending a lot of time with. And again, I could see myself in them. And all I wanted was for them to have everything they dreamed of. And that was just surprising to me, I guess. But surprising, and then on the other hand, completely made sense, And when I was supposed to be going there, every Tuesday. Well, I couldn't go on Tuesday and work on something and not know what happened on Wednesday. So then I was there 5 days a week. But it was such a beautiful experience for me. And, I'm still close to those young women today. They're in their 20s. And I just, it just lit a fire in me in terms of, the difference that you can make when you're just there for someone to listen. I wasn't there to solve any of their problems. I wasn't there to save them from anything. They have beautiful families. They have beautiful minds. They're, capable young women, but they just need someone to listen without judgment. And that was powerful for both of us. So for all of us. So that's kind of how I got on this path to spending more time with young people. And so that's pretty much kind of the center of my life now.
I love that. So let's dig more into that.
Yeah.
What really caught my ear was the moment you said, reconnected with my purpose. And I can see this emotion. I can hear the emotion and just how strongly you feel about that. So can we dig more into that? Like what was an instance or a connection or a conversation? Like what were some of those moments that for you were like, oh, this is my purpose?
It's just, I always joke that I was a born feminist. And so especially when it comes to young women, I just want them to have every resource. And not only that, but I want them to believe in themselves and have the self-worth that it takes to be strong, to conquer things that come along in life. And so from a super young age, like I remember being like 10 years old and watching the news with my grandfather. And there were, they'd show like the Senate floor and whatnot, and there was all these old men. And I said to him one day, like, why, like, who are these people? And he's like, oh, well, these are the people that make decisions for our country, and they make the laws, etc. And I was so confused because none of them looked like me. And I felt this like anger, and I was 10, and I felt this anger of like, they're making decisions for me. That can't be right. And so, that has just always been in me. And whether you can make a difference in, let's say, a policy or how you work in your community, that's like the byproduct of just having your voice heard. And having your voice heard is what builds self-esteem. It's what builds confidence. It's what builds purpose in your life, right? So, I'm not out here trying to, change the world. But I just want young women to know their voice is heard, and young men too, because they're dismissed so often. And as, not knowing enough. But I learn more from the young people in my life than anyone, So, yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. This moment of what I hear is there's something ingrained in you in that moment when you were a child that was like, this isn't fair.
Right.
Why is this not reflective? And I think we hear that often still, is why are these decision makers not representing me?
Yeah.
With whatever group or subculture is within our communities.
Yeah.
And it sounded like that was a really big moment for you. So do you feel like that carried into this experience working with these high school girls? Like, do you feel like that moment kind of played in? Because I'm hearing the like connecting with my purpose immediately made you think back to this moment.
Right.
And so how did that show up in the space?
Well, partially too, because it's like my grandfather dismissing it. Like, so his answer too basically was like, these are the smart people. Like, these are the people that know what to do. And I just thought, that's messed up, and so I think that, like, when young people ask questions too, like, I want to be honest with them, and I want to hear what they think as well. I don't have all the answers when they ask questions, right? And so maybe that's why I just go back to that moment, because I wasn't being supported by him. My questions weren't being, like, there was no curiosity on his side of why I felt that way. I was just told that's the way it is. And, it's not like it was a devastating moment or anything, but I want things to be different for the young people in my life, that they don't ever feel dismissed, that they don't ever not feel heard. So
that's such a powerful, I think, belief to come out of it, is to say, I or what I'm hearing is like, I was in this situation as a child. This was so pivotal for me in feeling unheard and misunderstood and dismissed. I believe young people have something valuable to say, so I'm going to listen.
Yeah.
And how has that kind of shown up in your work? How has that transformed you? Is there anything that you've heard from the younger people that you're working with that have like been these aha breakthrough moments?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So many things. Really just how often they feel uninformed, where people like make assumptions about what they know and what they believe. And so it's harder for them to be, just harder for them to be curious, I guess. And because they're trying to fit in versus being able to just openly ask questions. I mean, I'll give you an example this is so in the news right now, obviously, but when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I gathered a group of young women to talk about how that was going to impact them. And how that conversation started is I was with a young woman in my life who was about 26, I guess. And I just asked her, I said, are you and your friends talking about this? Like, what are your questions? What are the conversations happening in your circle? And she said, Lisa, we just feel like we don't really understand what our options are. We don't understand some pretty basic women's healthcare stuff. And I was surprised. I thought, wow, I thought we'd come so much further than this, But they didn't understand differences between birth controls that were available to them. They didn't understand if they were in a situation that they wanted to get an abortion, what that even looked like. Like, what is the process? What is safe? What's not safe? And that was really surprising to me. And so we got on a call, and what was beautiful about this call was there was this immediate desire for everyone on that call to be supportive of each other's opinions, questions, whatever support they might need, and to take care of each other's mental health. And we talked a lot about that, and just sexuality and what it means to be sexually active when you're a young woman, and how do you maintain your self-esteem, your own values around what that looks like for you, and how do we kind of just support our sisters in that. And that was not what I was expecting, but really a deep dive on the mental health side of it.
It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
What comes up for me is I think about growing up in Las Vegas as a woman, full-figured woman,
right?
And the hypersexualization of women. And what I experienced was a focus on male pleasure. And I think I've experienced that culturally in general, but way more focused in Las Vegas. And my mother has always been very forward with like, this is like your body, this is what to expect with your body. She was always trying to bring the information to me of what to expect when like my period started for the first time, and was like all the time bringing it up to the point where I was like, will you stop bringing this up? Because she wanted me to be informed on that, but then still this kind of cultural discomfort around talking about sex, sexuality, what is and isn't safe when you're ready to start having sex, things like that were never brought up. So then, like, all you have is the different dialogues and narratives around in the subcultures.
Right.
And those are conversations that I never had.
And see, and you're
either
a lot younger than me. And I thought things had changed, right? Since I was a teenager. Now, I was very lucky that I had a mother who, yes, I learned everything about like what my body did physically, etc. And, I wasn't surprised by my period and things like that. But my mom did talk to me about pleasure and orgasm and how to have an orgasm and how to know what you need and how to ask for it. My mom actually had those conversations with me in a very open and beautiful way. And I remember in college, like all my girlfriends coming and asking me all these questions because nobody's mother talked to them about these things. And I really thought that had changed, and it hasn't.
So what did that mean for you, having that relationship with your mother, to have those conversations? And like, how did that impact you?
It's so empowering, right? Now, did it make me immune from what you're talking about, being hypersexualized and feeling like you had to perform for men and things like that? No, did not make me immune from that. But it certainly helped me to think about when I became sexually active, what I wanted and what I wanted relationships to look like, and that I could decide. And, there was no shame around sex. So I think that's powerful and empowering, because we can get in also the good girl cycle of shame and self-flagellation about all kinds of things, right? And sex can be one of them.
Mm-hmm. There's so many different topics in our culture, I feel, that this is so fascinating how this has evolved already to go from like being what I'm hearing and observing from, if I was to put a bird's eye view, is the importance of conversation on topics that feel hard and feel uncertain and feel messy, and that having the conversations doesn't mean that it's all going to work out, but it's still so tremendously important.
Yeah.
As I think about themes that I've heard over the last handful of years of, like, I grew up, my father is an immigrant from Greece. And so one of the things he would always say to me as I was growing up is like, we don't talk about money, politics, or religion. And like, don't even talk about not talking about sex. But then, so what has happened is, now I'm fortunate that my mother was very open talking to me about money so that I could develop financial literacy, but I don't think it's a coincidence that there's financial illiteracy on my father's side of the family. And to say, don't talk about politics. Okay, well, I kind of feel like our entire world is politics right now, that our country has become hyper-focused on this is the topic of conversation for everybody, that now we don't know how to talk about those topics. And don't talk about religion. Oh my gosh. It's just, now we've become almost illiterate in how to have conversations with people. Which I feel like is a huge part of the impetus of Nexus of Narratives, is now we need to rediscover how to have conversations.
Yes, because it also takes practice. If you're not doing it over and over again, you can't do it well. And obviously you need safe spaces to do that, but sometimes, you know what? Like, the world is not just one big safe space. So if you're not practiced in how to disagree with someone without it escalating, how to be curious, again, just like asking questions instead of telling someone, I don't want to be told what to think. And so no one else does either. And this is something I do I have a second organization called the Alma Collective that's focused on serving organizations that serve women and girls. And I do something called Alma Talking Circles. And it's sometimes we do this in like a panel discussion type atmosphere where I ask questions of women of different generations to give their perspectives. And sometimes we do it more in like a group discussion setting. And we have one coming up in October about reproductive rights for this reason, because we've also, like, we don't want to talk about it because you're afraid someone's going to disagree with you, or you're going to be seen as something extreme. And, for years, women didn't talk about abortions, and personally, like, they were openly pro-choice, but they didn't tell their own experiences. Now we've, hit more of the other side of the pendulum where women are telling their stories. But I also think they're telling these stories in a way that is not always 100% truthful, because we're hiding the hard parts of it. We're standing on, this was my choice, this was my right, here's my story. But we also need to be talking about, well, what was hard and vulnerable about that too, because it's a whole experience. Mm-hmm. But if you say it was hard, if you say you had a traumatic experience, then you're afraid that someone's going to tell you, see, you made the wrong choice. And that's not it at all. Like, why can't we be full human beings and tell whole stories?
Yes, let's dig into that.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing is another part of my passion here, and this could be me filtering, hearing what goes with my narrative too, like totally transparent, that's completely possible, is what I'm hearing is the lack of openness on the other side, mm-hmm. and the closed heart and the black and white thinking of the receiver of a story is what is closing off the vulnerability.
Yes, because you're so afraid of judgment, mm-hmm. right? You're so afraid of judgment. And the reality is, at least what I found in my life, is when I'm vulnerable, the opposite of judgment happens. It's when I present something at 80% of the truth, right? And it doesn't mean I'm lying, but I'm leaving something out because I don't want to be judged by it. And that's when the unwanted advice comes, or the, well, did you think of it this way? Or, it's like, oh, well. But I'll give you an example. So I had an abortion when I was 22 years old. It's something I didn't talk about for a long, long time, and still don't talk about very often. But I was doing some work with some girlfriends in some spiritual and personal growth work, where we had to talk about, we did shadow work. And I can't remember the question that was asked in this shadow work, but there were like questions that you could choose from. And I did, and then we all sat and kind of just wrote about something that was part of like our shadow side, something that we don't talk about, something we feel not ashamed of, but just like, oh, if this could just be healed, I'd be a more whole person, right? And so that's what I talked about. And so it was my turn to speak, and I just told the story of what had happened. And there were, 8 of us maybe. And my girlfriends were silent for, maybe 5 minutes. And I have never experienced like space being held for me like that. I don't think in my lifetime. No one jumped in and it's okay, you did the right thing, or, just held this space. And then when one of my friends spoke, she said, I didn't think I could love you more. You know, and that was just about my vulnerability of, you know, making that decision when I was young, which was the right decision for me at the time, but then never becoming a mother and having doubts in my life of, was that just my one and only chance? And how I had to heal that, right? And if I hadn't spoken that vulnerability, I wouldn't have had that beautiful experience with my friends who saw me as whole and still loved me. And we all deserve that. We all deserve it. So, and honestly, you can see, I wear my heart on my sleeve. My feelings are on the surface at all times. And that's just something that is. I can't change that. And so it's not like I walk around not being a vulnerable person, I don't think, but we can all benefit from just being able to speak our whole truth.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to this story because I think this is something that's so beautiful that I think will be so important for people to get out of this conversation. Is even like in this moment, in this space, it doesn't matter as much exactly what your story of your abortion was, as much as this story is about how space was held for you and what that did for you. So can you dig into that a little bit more of what did that feel like in your body to experience that, and then how has that impacted you since?
Yeah, like it's like a weight being lifted off of you, you know. But it's more than that. It's this being held, and that changed me. That was in 2020, so that was only a few years ago, and how I was able to, I don't know, just accept myself on a different level. And it had nothing to do with the abortion, right? Some of it has to do with looking at your younger self with compassion. I don't know about you, but I can look back on things and just think, oh, why didn't I do it this way? And why didn't I do it that way? And in all sorts of moments in my life, right? And it's like, well, because you were doing the best you could at the time, but man, it's hard to remember that. And, you know, I had this. So yes, my friends are holding this space for me, and that's important. But it's also important to be able to do that for yourself and like really look at your past and your present with love and forgiveness. You know, I think I told you this story. I went to Munich last year at Christmas time with my niece, and I lived in Munich for 9 years. I moved there when I was 25, and I got married after I was there for 6 years, and then that marriage ended in a really painful way. And then I left, came to Colorado, and I have been carrying so much hurt about that relationship for 20 years. And when I went back to Munich, it was like there was also some really traumatic things that happened when I was leaving Munich 21 years ago. My best friend had been murdered. That was a horrific experience to go through that, losing him. My marriage ended. There was just a lot of trauma. And I go back to Munich, and as soon as I get on the train to go from the airport to city center, and we're in this, the train goes into a subway station, and the doors open, and it was the subway station where I used to get off for my job. And the smell hits me. And it's like, oh my God, you're safe. Like, my body had not, like, my mind knew that everything worked out. Like, yes, this was a sad part of my life, but I went on and I built beautiful relationships and, experienced all kinds of love since then. But my body did not know this. And so as I went through like the next couple of days in the city, that was my home and a place where I really grew up, right? Because I was 25 when I moved there, and I was changing and experiencing all these new things. And I did a lot of really brave things then. And I started to see all of it in just this very different light. Like, oh my gosh, you were a baby. You were a baby, and you just were doing the best you could. And my husband, he was a baby, and he was just doing the best he could. And, he was just human too. Instead of like what you did to me, and why didn't I fight back in this way or that way? Well, because that wasn't what was right for me at that time, and I knew it then. But then later there were consequences of like me not fighting for certain things in my life. But I just could see it in such a tender way.
So much compassion. Like, that's what I feel like I'm hearing in each of the micro stories that you're sharing, is that the healing moment, the aha moment, the magic happened with compassion. Like, for yourself, from others, towards others. Mm-hmm. That was, I feel like every one of them has come into like, this is the moment of transformation and realization.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking.
And like, isn't that what life's about? And isn't that why we struggle? Like, we're talking about politics. Like, what makes me crazy is our lack of humanity in so many ways. And that's what hurts me. It hurts my heart so much. And, like, how do we remind each other that that is all we have?
I said it in a couple of different conversations, and I said it yesterday actually on an Instagram Live, which is going to date when we do this recording versus when it's released. Is I had mentioned, especially when it comes to politics, but I think any belief systems that we develop, I firmly believe, like this cycle of socialization, we are a product of what we're exposed to, what we experience, what we're socialized into, and then we can make the choice to bring in additional education to alter that path, or we can stay within that cycle and keep that cycle of beliefs going for future generations. And I want to say that there's some research done in 2000 by Harrow, if I want to annotate the reference there, is then we have our different kind of bubbles of belief systems, and in these moments of high intensity, high conflict, low humanity, low compassion, that I feel like is the epitome of our political sphere at this moment. Yeah. And I can't speak for all time, but especially right now, I personally believe that that's noise, that's all here. It's this versus this, because it's so much more profitable to bring out fear. It brings in more votes to elicit fear. If we can pit each other against each other, then one thing can win in this side of someone's agenda. So then we're kind of like the victim of this really awful game that's going on. And I personally believe that when we tear apart all of that noise and dig really deep underneath that reaction from emotions, we can dig deep into what is the value that is leading to these emotions and get to the crux of that I think we're all so much similar that we are different. If we could just maybe calm our nervous systems enough, open our hearts enough.
Yes, I don't know what the answer is. It's like, would our nervous systems need calming if this wasn't happening? You know? And right. And I have so much compassion for the person who is not like me in their lifestyle, how they look, what they believe, and feels left out of the conversation and angry. But I don't think, to your point, like pitting two sides against each other is not the answer. It really is what we were talking about in the beginning. It's conversation. How do you have conversation, not arguments? When I was in college, I started college as a photography major. I loved photography. It was my art. But shortly into my program, I realized the program wasn't what I expected. And I was taking a rhetoric class. And I remember somehow I ended up in this rhetoric class, but one of the girls in my dorm was like, "Oh my God, that rhetoric class is a nightmare. How are you possibly?" And I was getting an A because it was like my happy place to, basically rhetoric is arguing in written form, or, persuasion in written form. And I've been a writer my whole life. And I was like, this is where I want to be. So that's how I ended up on the path to an English major and then a career as a writer. But, just even then, knowing like, oh, this is persuasion, and learning the art of that versus trying to debate, it is an art. And it's just not how we learn to communicate. Yeah.
Something that came up for me as you were sharing that is thinking about how can we support others to be less in the debate side, and that art form of conversation. I think there's also the sense of kind of going back to this high energy, high feeling, tense, us versus them feeling, and how do we cultivate open hearts in conversations so that when hard conversations happen, like the ones that you shared, how can a listener be open,
right,
and create that space that's safe for the other person?
I think it's questions like, what are you afraid is going to happen if I don't agree with you? Sometimes the answer to that, like just someone speaking what they think the answer to that is, and then hearing how extreme that might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
The world's going to come to an end if you don't agree with me. No. Like, what is going to happen if I disagree with you?
And also being okay with simply disagreeing.
Yes. Yes.
It can be that simple.
Right. And like, where I draw the line, I think, is with, acts of hate against other people. That's not okay. But that's not what we're talking about. That's not just disagreeing. And it goes back to what you were saying about, like, we all have this lens that we have been raised in and behind, and, and there are millions of them. There's not just like 5 stories in the world.
And there were more than 5 stories just in this conversation.
Yes.
And I think each of our lenses are just as unique as we are.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the saying that there are just as many versions of me as there are people who have experienced me.
Yes.
Plus myself and my perception of myself.
Yes.
And I think about times that I've tried to create space to come together, because I almost feel like part of the takeaway from this conversation for people who are listening is, how can those who are listening create open, safe spaces for vulnerable conversation? And I think there's so much to it, but to try and oversimplify it from my experience, what has helped me in creating that and my continued pursuit to create it, because I know it's still a work in progress, is every time I listen to a story, I will often have a moment where there's some other something that's being woven into the story from my experience, from the way I was raised, from the beliefs that I had been brought into, that I've developed along my life through different experiences. Those create my lens, my filter, and then when I take in a story, often I'll hear the story that's being shared, but then there's the experience, the beliefs, the whatever, that then starts to kind of add, fill in gaps around the story. And it's so easy to do that, especially when anything scratches at my personal trauma.
Yes.
And so what has worked best for me so far is to acknowledge that and recognize these are the specific words that were said by this person. That is it. Don't add the other ingredients and turn this chocolate cake recipe into something completely different with whatever ingredients I'm adding from my collection.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's also like, that's so important. And how do we expand our lens, right? So that you aren't always bringing the exact same filler to people's stories. Like several years ago, a friend of mine asked me to serve on this board that was doing international work. And I regret telling him no, but at the time but here's what came out of this. So I told him, I just don't think I have the international experience, even though I probably have more international experience than most Americans. I felt like I wasn't educated enough about the regions where he was doing work, etc. So after I told him no, I thought, I have to become more educated. And I thought, I have to just open myself up to opportunities to learn more about things I don't know in terms of the international scene and development. Within 30 days, I had a conversation with someone that led to me mentoring with a program that served international students in Boulder. Each cohort of this program represented like between 30 and 40 countries at any given time. And so I got to know, once again, these young people from all parts of Africa, so many different countries in Africa, South America, India, Nepal. I mean, you name it. I got to meet and get to know these people and understand their perspectives, their stories. I got to ask them questions and be curious through being in relationship with them. And that's how I started to learn that. And I just kind of asked the universe for that opportunity, right? And then there it was, because I was looking for it, because I recognized that's what I wanted more of in my life. And I think we forget the power we have to do that. We don't have to stay in this channel are on this channel, but see, things like social media make sure we do. It's showing us over and over again what we already believe.
So what did this experience do for you? Because I feel like it could be the perfect case for someone who's listening or watching to open their mind and their heart to other stories, to build that kind of collection of lenses and filters.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that transform you?
It gave me a different perspective on like personal struggles, right? So again, I'm there with these young people and they're telling me things that I think are universal, so they're, for example, maybe their desire to make their parents proud, or the fact that they have insecurities about the work that they're doing in the world. Like that might be the universal story. But then beneath that are cultural stories of what does that mean to make your parents proud when you're a young woman from India, for example. And here are the things that seem to be culturally acceptable to prove your value. And so you do that, and then you find you're unhappy. Now what do I do? And so just like hearing their stories about those things and watching them get on paths that were not meant for them, but then realizing it and being able to adjust it or not. Sometimes we are running in the wrong direction for a long time. And sometimes we're not. But, just being and seeing the power of intuition, where then when I'm in those conversations with those young people about, the businesses that they're trying to build or the life that they're trying to build, and I'm asking questions that are like, don't tell me what you think the answer is supposed to be. Tell me what's coming from your gut. Like, if I just say this, what's the first thing you answer? And it might be really inconvenient, but it's the truth. It's always the truth. I mean, intuition is something that I lean into so heavily. And so, but I got to learn that about what life was like for them growing up. What are the struggles? What are the systemic problems that they face that I don't understand and I can't understand as a Western woman. And so I think it just like built my muscle of listening and trusting people, right? Like trusting those that you're trying to help, impact, trust them to tell you what they need versus putting something on them that isn't, it's your path instead of their path.
That's really powerful. So what I'm hearing out of that, to kind of sum it up, because this feels really, really important, is you're taking in and listening and opening your heart, taking in all of those different stories. You learned how powerful listening is and how not to impose your views on others. Mm-hmm. You're like, wait, we are different, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And you had said not to impose my path on someone else. Mm-hmm. That feels really powerful. Mm-hmm. And to recognize that seems huge.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's not easy to do, right? You want to think you know what's best. Mm-hmm. Because you want to be, like, I don't know, helping. I think that's helping and supporting someone. But what I've really learned is helping people to listen to themselves is the best help you can give someone.
Help people listen to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, how many times have you ignored? to my detriment, so many times ignored what I knew was true.
So many times.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, as you get older, the consequences of that get bigger. It's like, I don't know what it is, if it's cosmic, I don't know what it is, but like the disaster of it gets harder and gets messier to clean up.
It's like, hey, learn this. I want to go back to how you said we often think we're helping when we, in a way, impose our views on others.
Yeah.
What came to my mind is the story of how I was able to finally find compassion for my father. So he and I really haven't had a relationship for 16 years now. That's been half of my life.
Yeah.
And by his choice. And to not rob this conversation to be that story, but to also still be vulnerable and share it, is he didn't grow up with the American culture. And I did. And I have, and I continue to.
Yeah.
And so me going to the homecoming dance as a freshman in high school, being driven by my date's parents, was absolutely unacceptable and worth him saying he didn't want me in his life anymore. Because I chose to go. And my mom said, my parents have been divorced most of my life. And she said, go. I'll deal with him. And the repercussion of that was him not wanting me in his life. And a lot of name calling and heartbreak later of things that I spent many years working to overcome, of horrible things that he said to me. And we sort of tried to rebuild a relationship when I was like 18 to 20 while I was in college. And the imposition that came onto me was, as I was being raised, was, oh, you're smart, so you're going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's acceptable. You are going to be a doctor or a lawyer, like, you're going to make a lot of money, and that's what you need to do. And so I went into my undergraduate career as a pre-med because that's what I felt I was supposed to do. And along the way, I did research in undergrad. I was like, I really like this. Med school is not for me. My brain doesn't work in the way that would lead me to successfully get into med school. I really don't care to have that path for myself. And I'm going to try out research. And I decided that, and I shared that with him, and that was unacceptable. And I know now that for him it was, I want you to be successful. I want you to be happy. I don't want you to be homeless or insecure, like financially insecure, like experience hardships. And this is the path that I best know to help you not experience hardship that I'm afraid of for you. And so when I had said, I'm not going to med school, I was applying to PhD programs. I wasn't completely committed to it. I'm glad I didn't go on to get my PhD. But he had told me, oh, well, I hope you find a rich husband because otherwise you're going to be homeless and this and that. And the last thing I had said to him was, you're full of shit. Like I'm going to be crying under a bridge over my degree in neuroscience. And I hung up on him. And that was the last thing I said to him. And actually, very recently, I realized through finding this compassion for where he was coming from, even though the way that he did it was so painful and damaging for me. It wasn't until a week ago today that I found it in myself to take a video with my daughter and say, hey, we're doing well. I hope you're doing well too. Here's your granddaughter.
I mean, thank God for that blessing, right? Thank God for that blessing that you could share something so beautiful with him. And I do think our parents that is the most difficult place to find compassion. Because somehow, that's who we're supposed to trust, be safe with, all the things. And I also had a difficult relationship with my father, and I didn't forgive him until about 6 weeks before he died. And when I did, it was instantaneous. I don't even know how to describe it, but someone said something to me that just helped me see him in a different light. And it was like every grievance I had disappeared. But man, I wish I had done that so much sooner, obviously. But it feels like you're condoning their behavior or something. Like we have these expectations of our parents, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the answer is. Because you can't make someone be like that. Wouldn't have changed his behavior. His behavior didn't change until the day he died. Until the day he died. But I changed. Mm-hmm. So anything he said to me didn't feel the way it felt for pretty much my entire life. And I'm sure with your dad too, there are memories you can find that were beautiful and supportive and loving. And so why do we let the hard ones take over? I don't know.
Pain is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And what solidified my decision to reach out is I made peace with not having a relationship with my father. And even had the conversation with my husband of what if he makes the choice to try to re-enter our lives.
Right.
And I have a fear. My father has said some very racist things.
Yeah.
And having a husband who's not white, I'm like, immediate fear response. What ifs? Yeah. And what solidified my decision to reach out was still being at peace with not having a relationship. Like, I'm not doing this to rebuild a relationship. If something comes out of it that he wants to have a conversation, okay, I'll have a conversation. I'm okay with him not responding because I can't control that. He hasn't responded.
Yes.
And to say the reason I'm reaching out is not to build a relationship, but because I realized when I had the thought through going through the course, hearing another story about a disconnected relationship with a father, to think, if he died today, would I be at peace with the last thing that I said to him? And there's the feisty, fiery side of me that's like, yeah, middle finger. Ah. And then I thought about it and I'm like, actually, I've been living into trying to build connection, embrace vulnerability, have an open heart, bring people together, and I would be a fraud. It would be inauthentic for me to continue to try to be this if I didn't also do that in my own life.
Yes.
And no matter what the outcome, now I feel like I'm in my authenticity to say I had an open heart in this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No matter what the outcome is.
Right.
And that's what gives me peace. And I swear I feel like I lost 50 pounds immediately.
Oh, yes. Yes, because it's not just hanging there. And this is the stuff that holds us back from everything we want. I'm so happy for you, in that. And it's interesting because just the other day, I was at breakfast with a few girlfriends, and one of them was sharing a difficult situation with her father, and we talked about it. And then later I thought, oh my gosh, I think I said the wrong thing. Like, I think I was trying to tell her how to forgive her father. And I called her to say that. Like, I just said, hey, I just want to apologize. Like, I understand how difficult our relationships are with our parents, and what you're feeling is completely valid. And I wasn't trying to tell you to dismiss it. I was only trying to help you open the door to giving yourself some grace, but it may not have come off that way. And so I just want to say I'm sorry. And she's like, what are you talking about? But I do think about these things. But sometimes, you get caught up in like, well, have you done this? Well, what about that? And, oh, he's a liar. Just forget about it. And it's like, oh, that's the easy way.
Mm-hmm. It's so much easier, but it's also so much more painful.
Yes. In the long run, it just chips away at you, and you don't get to live your full potential.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like, we think these things don't have to do with each other.
Spoiler alert. Into the microphone.
Yeah. But they're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not saying that I do this well. I struggle with it every day, and but I'm constantly trying to get to what is it. Mm-hmm. Trying to ask myself, when I meditate in the morning, and I just say, what do I need to know today? Who do I need to show up as? Mm-hmm. Who do I need to love?
That's amazing.
And I really do try to ask myself that every day. And sometimes, you don't like the answer, but it's never not the truth. Never. It's not your mind playing tricks on you, or, I think I shared with you, I broke my foot several weeks ago, and I was at the time really in this hyperactivity mode, Like, I'd been going through a lot of stressful things in my life, and my way of coping was a lot of physical activity. And I thought that was good, right? Like, I'm hiking 4 mornings a week. I'm at yoga every day. I'm golfing 3 days a week. I'm like, that's how I'm taking care of myself. I'm moving, so I can like move the stress out of my body. And then in an instant, I'm on the couch for 6 weeks. And it was like, no. And one of my friends asked me, okay, what have you learned? And I was like, nothing. I've not learned anything. I don't know what this is for. I don't want to talk about it. But the reality was that when I got quiet, the day after this happened, and I was on the couch, and, my foot's the size of a football, and I can't walk, and I just heard this voice say, sit down. It's right in front of you. And I'm like, that is not what I wanted to hear. So I wouldn't admit it to anybody when people are like, what are you hearing? What's like, I'm like, oh, nothing. I'm not hearing anything.
It's literally right there for you.
It's literally right there. And I'm literally stuck on the couch and crawling up my stairs in the house and all this BS.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. So, again, I am certainly not doing it well every day.
Well, and that's part of being human.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere just yet. We're going to continue this conversation in just a moment.
Check it out. Yeah.
I am so grateful that you have chosen to spend your time with me here on the Nexus of Narratives. I know that time is our most invaluable resource, and I am grateful for your support by just listening. If you would like to further support the podcast and my continued work in this space, please go to www.nexusofnarratives.org. That is NEXUSOFNARRATIVES for more content, ways to support, and connect with others. The Nexus of Narratives is a project, a passion project of mine in the Nexus Impact. So if you are looking for coaching services to become the type of leader that others want to follow, or help improve the culture and engagement of your teams, your organizations, and build greater community to help reduce lost costs due to turnover and inefficiency, reach out to me. I would love to help support you in your work. And if that is the avenue that you would like to go, you can find me and connect on my website. That is the nexusimpact.com, or THENEXUSIMPACT.com. Thank you.
All right, brief little interruption to support my hungry child. We've got the dogs and the baby and the babysitter all up in the room.
This is life.
Yeah, this is life.
It's all good.
Yeah, so I'll ask you the same questions that I ask everyone who has joined is, how can your story create connection for others who might resonate with something that you share?
I think it's just reminding ourselves of, like what we said about compassion. Trying to have compassion for yourself it's difficult. It's not the same for everyone what that looks like, right? And if you've never experienced it, maybe you grew up without experiencing compassion in a safe space, then it's harder to find what that feels like for you. But just keep looking, and be fearless in that.
I love that. That's amazing. And so you shared many really incredible, deep, vulnerable stories. And so if someone who's listening or watching can resonate that maybe they're in a place that you were, what would you say to your past self?
Like, take more chances. When I was 23, I was engaged to a beautiful man, and he passed away suddenly in an accident. And he was my soulmate, and so losing him was unbelievably difficult. But at the time that he died, I really made a decision that I needed to live with all of us. And I held on to that for a long time. Like, it caused me to take chances in my life that I never would have taken, I think, if I hadn't gone through that loss. And as the years have gone on, sometimes I lose that. But he is always with me, like, always. And in ways that just seem kind of ridiculous sometimes. I mean, right after my divorce, that winter, I would go skiing by myself every Tuesday morning. I would just get up and drive up to Breck and ski for the day by myself. And I would go flying down the mountain, and it would feel like he was sitting on my shoulders, and I would just scream. And like, joyful scream, but it was like he was there screaming with me. Like, it was amazing. And so he always, just the memory of him, the spirit of him, like, always reminded me not to let things pass me by, to do things scared. But then things happen, and you get more scared, and you get more like, oh, but I need this paycheck, or I need to make sure this person is okay. So you don't take chances. And that's something I am really trying to live harder into now. At 56 years old, like, I'm not taking enough risks. And so I think that's like it, right? Like, take a chance on yourself. Like, this is it. This is all we have. So Yeah, and I think from the outside, people would see me more as a risk taker. I've owned my own business since I was 25. There's not like a lot of security, quote unquote, in my life. But what matters is if I feel like I'm pushing the envelope. And so,
Yeah, one of the analogies that we use in a lot of the personal development work that I've done is as you continue to expand yourself and stretch out of your comfort zone, it's kind of like a rubber band. You can continue stretching it. And when you go back, like if you fall back into your comfortable patterns, you're still never in the same place as where you started. Yeah. And then it becomes easier to stretch further, but you're never going to fall back to exactly who you were.
right.
Like in the best way possible.
Or what I find myself doing is like, I'll do something that is so incredibly vulnerable and authentic to me and brave, and it'll go really well, and I'll almost not believe it. And so then I'll go like what I call like my turtle mode. Oh, okay. Well, that was great. I don't know what that was. So I'm just going to go into my turtle mode and not do that again.
So you almost act like it was some kind of an anomaly as opposed to like, how great was it that I created or cultivated this?
Like, I don't know how I pulled that off. That was a fluke. Or whatever it is. Like, and then I pull myself back into my shell. And I just want to stop doing that. That's,
So that message is not only for your past self, but for your present self too.
100%. Because also when you're younger, the risks are smaller. Or it's easier to find them everywhere because there's so many firsts, right? And so
I feel like there's also more fear as you age too. Like at least for me, there's like if I don't take too big of risks, then it's safer somehow, as if there aren't always just inherent risks. And I'm like, oh, but I have a child now, so therefore I shouldn't fill in the blank of thing that's probably not as big of a deal as I'm making it up to be.
And it's weird how simultaneously you can you've become more conditioned to be a certain way, and you become less conditioned to care what anybody thinks at the same time. So this is like always in conflict. And so like how to reconcile that, I don't know, just every day, right?
You just got to check in every day.
Every day. I mean, there's certain things that I really don't give a damn about when it comes to what people think about me. And there are other things that I do care, and that's really more, I think, around things like, do people care that or think that I'm compassionate or kind,
It's always there for us.
Yeah.
And throughout these different stories, whether it's from the past or now, what did or do you need most to feel connected to others around you?
Honesty. I think that's my biggest fear in relationships is someone hiding something from me or not telling me the truth. And so if I get the slightest inkling that I'm not being told the truth, or if there just isn't full transparency, then I tend to run from that. And, probably that's not a bad thing. It's just that is what I need, honestly.
And for last but not least, for someone who's listening, if they haven't already, flipped the table and turned it off, for someone who cannot resonate with anything you shared, maybe is angry by some of the things that you shared, what is something that you would say to them to help build connection across different systems of beliefs?
I mean, just be curious. Like aren't we here to just learn? And again, we don't have to agree with what we learn, but what do we miss out on when we don't open up to something new? there's that quote from Newman that's like the pain, something around the pain of remaining in a tightly bound bud was more painful than blossoming, or something like that. Goes like that, right? And it's like, that's it. Like, do you just want to be all tied up and safe? Or do you want to hear something? Yeah. So, or do you want to,
quotes?
yeah. Or do you want to like open and listen, and feelings of anger and resentment, etc. They're valid, but they don't feel great.
They're heavy.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of what keeps that trap, that pressure on.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah. And joy. I mean, like, where is the, we just need so much more joy. This is one of the things that I learned when I talked about the program where I was with all these international students, and like, oh my gosh, hearing music and experiencing dance, for example, from other cultures is so powerful. Like how it moves trauma, stress, emotion through your body is beautiful. And some of my, like, the most fun I've had dancing is with these kids. Like, they're DJing this stuff that I would never listen to, and it is amazing because the joy that it exudes from them in that, and it's loud and it's bold. Like,
Sounds contagious.
it is, right? And it's like, that's living. That's living.
So amazing.
Yeah.
I hear through all of this, if I was to wrap a bow on it, is open heart, compassion, blossom, be curious, listening, listen with an open heart. Take that home.
Yeah.
And into your conversation.
Because it can't hurt you. It can't hurt you. Like, listening can't hurt you.
You choose what to do with that information.
You choose.
You're still in full control.
Exactly.
Wow, what an amazing thing to realize too. It's like, I think there's probably that flavor of like feeling out of control if you hear these different things and whatnot. It feels chaotic, but yeah, you're still in control of your own mind and your thoughts. You know, we filter things out all the time.
Yes. When I broke my foot, literally, I hit the floor. It happened so fast. And instead of panicking, I just said, no, tell yourself you're safe. And I just started repeating to myself, you know, there's like this excruciating pain, and I'm thinking, I gotta go up the stairs. And I said, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe. You're absolutely safe. Because that was the fear. That's what kicks in fear, is that we're out of control, something's going to hurt us, etc. So it wasn't a thought of, no, I'm okay. It was like, no, I'm safe. And that's, you know, what gave me the presence of mind to get myself back up the stairs by, you know, whatever. But that is so important.
You can be not okay and safe at the same time.
Yes.
Incredible. I think we need to just cut it right there, that you can be not okay and safe at the same time.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
What incredible stories. I really loved talking to you too. It was so enriching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Special thank you goes out to my sweet and talented husband, DJ Richardson, for creating the music that is used in this production. Thank you so much, so deeply, for spending your time with me here on the Nexus of Narratives. I hope that you found this to be a tremendously valuable use of your time and your capacity, and that this might help you to create greater connection and compassion in the spaces all around you.
Well, and that's part of being human.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a quick
Yes.
to go check on the family.